to be doing this and organizing it in Singapore. So Pragya Yoga and Wellness is very honored, and it's a proud moment for us to be part of this global festival and this endeavor to bring yoga to people. This year, the theme in Singapore is Yoga for Health and Harmony. And this is more relevant now than ever before because we live in a world that is more chaotic than calm, filled with panic than peace, and surrounded by fear than freedom. So we need yoga more than ever before. And I think doing this is just one part of how we might achieve a sense of calmness and ease and peace through the world. We are very, very grateful to the Ministry of Ayush in Delhi and their support. And we are extremely grateful, particularly to Dr. Ishwar Basavareddy, Director of the Morarji Desai National Institute of Yoga, for his guidance, insight to plan this entire event and share it with us. So welcome to this particular discourse and workshop on yoga for health and harmony, which is the theme that we are celebrating today. Across Singapore, we have different events occurring and happening. This morning, we did the Common Yoga Protocol at the High Commission of India and Singapore. And we have other webinars and other things planned, which are free and open to public. They are also live streamed, so feel free to participate and share this information with others. It's a great opportunity to be part of this global movement that is towards health and happiness and harmony. And we are proud at Pragya Yoga to be associated with this in a very, very active and involved way. Our mission is to spread and share the teachings of yoga with people across the globe. We design and collaborate with governments and institutions to design teacher trainings, classes, courses, and are also work with specific groups such as pregnant women in the area of evidence-based research. And also we are actively involved with local and government and global agencies to design and improve standards in yoga teaching. So we are in a very fortunate place at a fortunate time, and we consider ourselves truly lucky to be a part of this entire space. Today's topic is yoga for health and harmony, and we will focus on the relationship of the mind and the breath. So oftentimes when we are anxious, we feel that the breath becomes very, very different in terms of how it works. And when we are calmer, it's very different, just as we experienced at the beginning of this session. So today we will look at this specifically and look at techniques to help us feel a lot better. Our expert speaker today is Nadia Faruqi. She has been a yoga teacher in Singapore. So she has been working here for about 15 years. We worked here together a long time. And she is an expert with pranayam, classical pranayam in particular. And she will share some of the techniques that we know about, but why do we do them, what are the benefits of them, and how we might actually practice them. So this session is in two parts. We will look at these techniques and how we might actually understand them and do them correctly. So she is also a senior student of Dr. Tiwari, who is a very well-known teacher and an expert in India. And Nadia has been sharing the teachings in that lineage with students in Singapore and abroad. She leads retreats to Turkey and other places, and has worked for a long time in the breath as a student and also as a teacher. So we're very fortunate to have her lead this session. I'd appreciate if you could welcome Nadia Faruqi. Over to you, Nadia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, Sujata. I actually, it was interesting, we spoke about this a few days ago, for me to be doing this. And when she spoke about yoga for harmony, it just brought a smile to my face, because I always use yoga for harmony for myself, because there's no way that we can control our environment. And it's really in those chaotic times that the harmony that you have installed inside of you comes in handy. So the world doesn't change around you, but you are blessed like I am with a fantastic teacher. Shri Opitivarji is my guide, my guru. And I'm a little bit emotional saying that, because that's the amount of love and respect that I have for him. And the reason why I even touch that emotion is because this is such a powerful practice, such a powerful practice. Now, what I did for this session was I penned down my thoughts, and I penned them down right after practice. Because that practice space becomes a very potent space where it all comes together. Because this is deep knowledge. This is deep knowledge that awakens itself naturally as we come from a point of first preparing the body and cleansing it and clearing it, to then sitting on a mat and installing the techniques. So please bear with me. I'll read off of my script, my pen down thoughts for a few minutes. Then I'll lead you guys through one practice, one pranayama, that really comes in handy on days when stress has brought a certain amount of shakiness in our nerves and a certain amount of fire on our nerves that's a bit unwanted for us. We're very much human. We never become machines. Therefore, when stress comes and as we do daily practices, it starts to just, bring us back to a place of neutral, so that we can restart and restart fresh with all the cellular body buzzing. So when I say buzzing, it's not buzzing with excitement, it's buzzing with receptivity in my mind. So, and for me personally, pranayama becomes a very potent tool because it awakens me to be receptive. And these are tools that are mechanical in nature, but they are able to cultivate a state of mind that you're left with. And a state of being that you're left with, not even a state of mind, state of being that you're left with, that brings you to a place of harmony and also joy. And joy in our definition is not a high, it's a steady feeling. It's a steady feeling of, and sometimes involves gratitude also, because it's just a spontaneous recognition of something beautiful that is happening within nature, within yourself, and it's all cultivated through these practices. So let me just go over what I have penned down here. Hopefully it makes sense. If it goes a bit too deep for you, just experience it in practice. And then your practice itself determines your experience. And that's the most important part of the yogic process. It's ours and ours alone. So the theme of this the theme of the event is health and harmony. It's, like I said, it's very close to my heart because I'm a wellness advocate. We believe total health comes from integrating body, mind, and spirit. A lot of times we forget about the spirit. Yoga shines light in all three aspects of our being. I would like to choose one limb within yoga, the most important one for me as a student and teacher of yoga. I believe the ancient text, Hatha Pradipika, has given it its due importance. I'm speaking of pranayama as a potent limb of the process. Pranayama done with proper guidance and precision is transformative for the citta. I can say this with confidence from my own experience with these practices. I've had a long relationship with yoga of
about 22 years. And like a lot of others, it came to me in the West as a practice of yoga asana. It was not until I was introduced to my teacher, Sri Opi Tiwari, about 15 years ago, that I started delving deep into the practice of pranayama. I've learned the classical methodology, as I mentioned, under his guidance. I was lucky in that way. It continues to benefit me daily, and it inspires me every day, literally every day, when I'm teaching. And the inspiration really comes from the feedback that I get back from my students, and also, within my own practice, when you see value in something, that great of value in something, you're just as confident to teach it then, and share that. I realized that yoga was an experiential process that unfolds in personal development. A process with all its ingredients connected in a systematic order. If yoga asana made me awaken to sensation and steadiness, pranayama awakened me to experience and meditation. Meditation, in my definition here, means the value of silence. A spontaneous state that the mind comes to observe consciousness. A successful pranayama practice brings you to that point of meditation. So we talk about meditation, and we talk about how we should we should sit for meditation. But the way I have learned and understood and connected the dots between all these practices, between all these limbs, is we get to the point of asana where our body is not suffering. So that means that we get strong, we get stable, and we get somewhat symmetrical. And we're able to, and then obviously we emphasize on flexibility quite a bit as well. Because when then you go on to seated practices, pranayama being one of the seated practices, steady seat. So you develop that in asana. But a lot of us then get stuck on asana. And I would say, if my teacher had not come into my life, I would have probably just been caught in that spiral of educating myself through asana. To me, looking back, it was two-dimensional approach to my understanding of yoga till pranayama came to me. So when through pranayama, so I've written here that every time I taste a drop of stillness, it's that precious. I feel overwhelmed with gratitude for my own teacher. Of course, my teacher will transfer all the credit to his teacher, or on and on till we reach through the lineage to those true seekers who created this system that we're all benefiting from today in this world, in this modern life. Our sadhus created this system of knowledge in isolation in ancient times, and yet the value of these practices are most relevant in our modern life. What is pranayama, you may ask? I would like to keep my answer brief so that the many benefits of pranayama come to you through your own practice with an experienced teacher. Pranayama techniques use the breath to connect with source energy within us. The techniques use breath to channel energy. In other words, breath is distributing life force all around our body. Through pranayama practices, we know the value of retaining breath as therapy for calming the mind. The techniques are very precise when we are learning the system. So there's a lot of people are a bit confused about what pranayama does, and a lot of students initially come to us and say that as soon as they started breathing well, they started benefiting from pranayama, from breath work, I would say. But as a purist, in some ways, not in a true way, I would say, The value of pranayama is more with retaining breath than with taking in a lot of oxygen. So what happens in pranayama on a more fundamental level is that when you are inhaling slowly, naturally the body absorbs more. So that's the fundamental breath work that we all kind of experience right away. But how is pranayama different? What pranayama does is that it allows us to experience the value of stretching the breath, which creates a pause in between breath. So what that pause does, especially on the exhale, we typically, in terms of technique, our exhale becomes double of inhale. And the reason for that is we're holding retention in process. We're holding retention in process of exhalation. And what that does to the mind is something that is transformative for us in general. So I'll just move forward. So once again, the oxygen has tremendous value, and most people come from a place of not knowing their breath, not able to breathe properly, to oxygenate the organs and systems. All of those have benefits. Then in pranayama, the therapy goes beyond that. The therapy is there for the physical body and the mind. And the mind benefits from it, from retentions. So the way we introduce retentions to new students is by stretching the exhale longer. So it becomes double. So it becomes very precise to a double thing, the double 1-to-2 ratio. Because in the institute, Akivalyadham in Lonavala in India, was founded by my guru's teacher, Swami Kuvalyanandaji, who was a scientist. At that time, he had limited apparatus, therefore, but extensive knowledge, extensive experiential knowledge, and a ton of devotion and dedication. So his findings still hold true. But as in Kevalyadham, what they did do side by side is whatever they found, whatever their findings were in regards to the benefits of yoga, they started seeing them through apparatus in their labs. So they made sure that there was a lab, a scientific lab, a research lab in-house at the ashram. So it's a research center. Kevalyadham is a research center, an ashram, and much more, an education center. So, so I will leave you with that information, and then I'll go forward of if there are any obstacles. Usually when we are speaking of a process, can I do this? Can my child do this? Is there anything that I should be made aware of? And I'm just going to go over it in a general manner. So what is pranayama? We spoke about that. And then are there any obstacles you may ask when practicing pranayama? Yes, there are. Pranayama was initially developed purely for spiritual growth. It was later realized that it was important to have good physical health to progress in spiritual practices. Some pranayama are specifically designed to give us that optimal physical health before we begin on our spiritual journey. And the other pranayama, which are meant specifically for the spiritual journey, also balance us constitutionally and strengthen our immune system, our whole circulatory system, and I can go on and on. I'm not going to go so deep into the therapeutics because that will take a long time to go into. So, like I said, there are obstacles, but obstacles there, and they can you can go past them through the practices themselves. Okay, Um, there are unique recipes for each student. Each one of us has a unique constitution, so it's no one fit. And also, what I know for my students is that yes, there are general practices that are great for everybody, and then when you go into yoga therapy and you're trying to remedy certain conditions in the constitution, typically we speak about that as per imbalances in the Ayurvedic language of imbalance of Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. So then it becomes remedial for each individual. And yet they have general benefits. And I also believe that pranayama can be done as per season, as per situation. And sometimes I myself would drop my retentions. That retentions means retaining breath, because on that day I just need to smooth out my breath, to smooth out my mind. Retention is that pause in the middle where you're retaining breath. There's no, you're kind of holding breath, right? And some days that's just not applicable or useful. So we kind of customize accordingly, which is why specifically for pranayama, you cannot take a chance on learning from books only. It's very important for you to go to a teacher who's had experience with the practice in teaching themselves, of course. And so for me, if I speak to you guys about me as a student, then I actually reference my books later, because there was that one-on-one teacher to student relationship that developed, and after that it was my own practice that continued to inform me of what was going on, and then I would read it in a book, and that was more true to me, because usually we read things and we take them in, and then that dictates our experience. But in pranayama, for a person like me, it was the experience that said aha to the literature that I read later and understood it in depth. So these are all the things that are happening in the body for you. So I'll go on. Okay. Okay. To do pranayama productively, we need to clean out pathways that carry our life force. So Shatkriyas are purificatory practices to prepare students for pranayama. So Shatkriyas are not the pranayama practice, but they are practices that we do to prepare the body for life force to be able to move inside, or if you're trying to push through, even something as subtle as the breath, if you're pushing through it, then it irritates the subtle body, because you're not ready. You have not prepared the body. The body channels, the purificatory channels are not ready yet. So sometimes we think that the practice itself has done us wrong, but we've kind of done wrong by the practice, because we're not ready yet. So that's the other thing why retentions are done. Retentions in pranayama are done slowly, because you're preparing the nervous system to accept it. So in regards to the mind, so just talking about this and then coming to the problems that the mind creates, right? In pranayama, the mind is trained to not become an obstacle in the process of yoga, because mind in its nature likes to be fickle. It's all over the place, right? But sometimes in modern psychology, there's a different understanding of that. They think there's something wrong in the mind. But in yoga, we believe that the mind itself is a problem. So what we do with the mind is like I wouldn't spoiled child, not a spoiled child, but a child that is out of, is not, okay, like for example, a child who feels in that moment really out of control within themselves. So mind sometimes becomes that way. And we are always looking to the mind as the boss of us, and therefore, and that mind then becomes our personality. And through the yogic practices, and that's why it's really beneficial to do the practices before you read it in literature, because you realize that it's happening to you. For example, for me, for the longest time, I thought there were two people living inside of me. There's an observer in me, and there's that child. The child that goes from one thought to the other, goes in the past, it goes in the future. And that's just somebody that I live with, right? And I've become very comfortable in that space, in living with that child. But then at some point I realized years later, I don't know, that I remember that moment where I said, what happened to that child that used to be always there? Why is he calm? And that's a true experience, because and when you start practicing pranayama regularly, you understand things through experience. And that was my experience, and I was quite happy with the fact. And then later on, when that voice came back, because of that the power of pranayama being slightly eroded because of not practicing regularly, or not, there could be many reasons, I can't go into them at this point in time. But when that voice came back, it was more irritating than in the past, because I had already experienced something that tasted much better. Calm down. It's like when you tell your child, there's nothing wrong, calm down. So that's where I stand. I want to check in.
I think that's great insight, and a good background for beginners, as well as for people who are starting out on the journey to discovering the relationship between the breath and the mind. I think it would be very useful and helpful for the next part of this discourse, where we can actually taste and feel this in a tangible way. So perhaps when we try to look inward and try to harness the breath, there are multiple approaches to it. One being evidence-based research, which is a very, very big part of how we are approaching and looking at practices now. But also there is that tangible feel of it, the heart of the practice itself, and how we experience it in a very real, visceral manner. So I'd encourage us now to look at the very practical aspects of it for the next part of this discourse. So I'll hand you over back to Nadia to look at how we might explore the breath in its fuller sense, in a tangible way, with practices and tools and techniques that we can harness to either elevate the nervous system in terms of its intensity, or calm the nervous system down in terms of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system responses, the fight or flight response, or the relaxation and rest response that our bodies have. So over to you, Nadia.
Sure. So since we're talking from going from all this theory to practice, I'd like to share one of the techniques with you guys first, and then you can sort of have a feel of it yourself. So I'd like for you to just come into an upright spine. We typically do this cross-legged on the floor, but the idea is for you to be upright and seated. So come to an upright spine that's steady. I typically like to set up my seat nicely so that I can be on it for a little bit longer. So for that, for me, that means sit bones are further back so that the curve of the lower back appears. And then you come into the fullness of your upper back, which is where the back of the lungs are. There are lungs in the front of us, and there are lungs in the back of us. And their larger part of lungs actually sit in the back of our body, which, they're encapsulated by the ribs. So once you are ready, go ahead and close your eyes, and any information that I give you, just taste it. all of a sudden you don't even have to look at it. So I'm hoping to be able to share with you the technique of Ujjayi Pranayama. Now, Ujjayi Pranayama is done, like I had told you earlier, to cool the fire on the nerves. Pranayama always wakes up the parasympathetic nervous system, which and it calms down the sympathetic nervous system. So we are switching from sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system and see what happens as a result. So in terms of technique, once you are ready, in pranayama, we start out with exhaling first. As you are exhaling the first breath, naturally when the breath empties, there's a connect that's made into your lower belly. We call this the seat of apana. Okay? Now, belly becomes this manager of breath. So when you start to inhale, the lower belly tone will allow the breath to move upwards towards the lungs for any technique that we do in pranayama. So in general, we start with the exhale just so that we come to a point of contact with our lower belly, our core muscles in the front. And then those core muscles will not only control the breath, they will manage the control of the breath so that when you exhale, the belly tones. And then as you inhale, you do it slow. And then as you, through both nostrils, I'm going over the technique now. So you're inhaling slowly through both nostrils after exhaling and toning the belly. And then you're going to close the right nostril right at the edge of the bone. So you're not going to push the nose this way or that way. You're just going to plug it up right from the edge of the thumb or the finger. So we use either the thumb or we use the ring finger. So we're going to place that right there at the notch of the bone. And when you are exhaling, you're going to do it through the left side. Like I told you earlier, the ratio of inhale to exhale is 1 to 2. So if you're inhaling for 5 counts, for example, you're going to exhale for 10. If you feel that the exhale cannot be as long as double, then you shorten the inhale to be able to regulate the exhale to double. But the idea, once again, is to make your exhale slower. There's retention in process. Now coming back to the technique, what is the technique? Once you have toned the belly and you're ready to take your first round of Ujjayi Pranayama, you inhale through both nostrils slowly. You close the right nostril and exhale out through left nostril, in double time. Maintain your eyes closed. Now for Ujjayi Pranayama specifically, as the breath channels from the source that I called the area where you have toned, as the breath is transferred upward towards the lungs and channeled through the throat, there's a hissing sound to the breath. I'd like for you to do about 6 rounds of this practice. Take your time, do not be in a rush. When unsure, completely clear the breath first before you start your first round. So again, exhale to tone. Use that tone. Inhale, direct the breath through both nostrils upwards towards the lungs. Then close the right nostril and exhale through the left nostril in double time. If there's no perfection in your timing, it doesn't matter. At this stage, there is just this understanding of what happens when we slow down our breath. At this point, we are training the nervous system slowly to accept retention. Go ahead and do that for 6 times. And then when the mind needs to be channeled, you channel it towards the sound of the breath. So continue to bring the mind to observe the sound and the feed of the breath. There's a hissing sound that you can hear that's passing through the glottis. Remember that the manager of the breath is your lower belly, so if your lower belly tone drops, then the breath just disappears. So keep that contact, the steady contact, even on the exhale, especially on the exhale, because carbon dioxide has a greater ability to escape because it's part of the mechanism of our body. It's naturally a poisonous gas. But then, a small exposure of carbon dioxide through pranayama, it has a completely different effect for the body, for the mind. Continue to practice in this way with your eyes closed. But when you feel you are done, you sit in pause. So the pause in the breath itself is the most potent part, where you take in the residue for the benefit of the practice, assimilating it. Remember, when you're breathing, take a note of your back lungs, your back ribs expand outwards and sideways and front through the lungs. Remember that there's no force in the breath. It's a very subtle, just the right amount of effort. Take away the force, or the breath will get stuck. And when the breath does get stuck, remind yourself that there may be too much force. When you're tackling the subtle body, we're not working with force. We're working with effort, optimal effort, not force. Allow yourself to be leisurely with the breath, the pacing of the breath on the inhale, and then the exhale, even more leisurely. It's almost like you're moving through a mala. So each pearl, if one pearl is a breath, the next one is of a pause. So it's that smooth breath that incorporates even retention. Allow yourself to enjoy of using the right amount of effort, not too much effort. And just be present, and you will become aware. You will become present and aware with the help of the practices. If the mind falls away into thoughts, bring it back and continue to channel it onto the sound and the feel of breath, to a point where you feel this intimate union, where there's no separation between breath and the observer. Awareness and breath, it's all one. It's all one experience, a very intimate union. Once you are done, taking your time to be with the breath, and then pause after you're done, feel free to open your eyes.
Thank you, Nadia. That was beautiful. That was really beautiful and quite appropriate for these times where we are struggling to deal with so many things on a daily basis. I think this session was really helpful for a lot of us in so many different ways. And hopefully, the takeaway is that a consistent, regular practice in a methodical, systematic manner leads to more results that are sustainable and will help in the long run to develop depth as well as breadth in your practice. Across Singapore today, we are working with different places and iconic venues. So before this event today, we had pre-events happening in the Singapore Botanical Gardens, the Gardens by the Bay, the Merlion, and all these iconic places where we practiced and had pre-events happening. Today, just a little while later, we will have a webinar on insomnia. So yoga for insomnia and how to work with meditation. So we are organizing this also will be live streamed at the same channels that we have here. It will help to bring in. So in the morning, we began with the common yoga protocol with the active practice, followed by the breath work, which was about healing the body from within. And to sum it up, it will be a webinar. So if you aren't catching your 40 winks, then you catch us live on live stream at our channels. The same will be live streamed on the Morarji Desai National Institute of Yoga channel as well. So to sum up, I'd like to thank Nadia for her time and her valuable teachings, as well as to all of you for joining in. This truly is a very special time for us because after COVID, these are some of the largest yoga events that we are doing across the country since rules relaxed on April 26th. So it's a very special time that we are doing this festival, and a lot of people are benefiting, and we are hoping that in these stressful times that yoga and its benefits will percolate deeper to all of us, and that we will have the tools and techniques to become more and more self-compassionate, and that will reflect to others outward as well. Let us close this practice with a chant. So if you would please join me, sit comfortably, close your eyes. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been so special, and I take it as a personal favor that you came to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Nana.
Thank you.
I think we had very little time to